is to consider the book and the person of Daniel. All of us have people who've made a real strong impression on us. Situations and people where we remember that for the rest of our lives. As a teenager, when I was a fairly new believer, I read a book called Dare to be a Daniel. And it was based on the character of Daniel in the Bible. It wasn't real long, it was easy to read. But as I read that text, God impressed me with how unusual that young man was. Daniel was only about 12 to 15 years of age when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came into Israel and overtook Jerusalem. And when he did, he sent men out to survey the city, to look for young men who were talented, who were handsome, who were in extremely good shape, and that he could take back to Babylon to prepare and train to become leaders in Babylonia. Daniel was one of those young men. 3 of his friends were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's interesting to me that God not only chose Daniel, but that the 4 of them were taken together back to Babylon. When they got there, they were extremely well treated. They were taken into the king's house, and they were given special quarters. They had everything established for them. They ate food that was just at the very, very top of the list of what you would want, because they were being prepared to be the leaders of Babylon. When that happened, Daniel soon realized that the food they were being given was food that had been prayed over and committed to the gods of Babylon. And as he and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego talked about that, they felt that they could not eat that food without it contaminating them. Even though the food was the same, even though it was prepared the same as everyone else's, but it had been committed to a foreign god. And so they spoke to the person in charge of it. And they asked, and they made the request of, please, let us eat our food, our diet. And he said, well, if I do, you're not going to look as good, you're not going to be as strong, you're not going to be as wise, and it's going to reflect poorly on me, and I could be beheaded. And so Daniel said, please give us 10 days. And at the end of that 10 days, if we are not doing as well as everyone else, then we'll talk about it. And so after 10 days, the man came back to him, and they looked better. They were stronger. They had more of a sense of wisdom and character. And the man was amazed at how in 10 days they had been so changed by eating the food that was their food as Jewish people and as followers of God than the food that had been committed and dedicated to a foreign god. And so he allowed them to eat the food that they chose and that was prepared for them. This is an amazing book. It tells the story of young men who were committed to the Lord, had not only trusted in him, but lived for him, and were willing to pay a price, to stand apart, to serve him, to follow him, and I'm sure they hoped to be used by him. Now Daniel was probably about 15 years of age at that time. Some say it might have been as early as 12, but most seem to agree that it was probably about 15. And so the 3 of them, or the 3 of his friends and himself, were kept together and went through this training together for the purpose of being prepared to serve in Babylon. But while they were in a foreign country with foreign gods, they were there to serve the living God. And as we go through the whole book of Daniel, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see God in charge. We're going to see them trusting him. We're going to see them obedient to him. And we're going to see that in Babylon they overcame in every situation. I think it's so much like the time in which we live. Folks, we live in a time when our world is just like coming unglued at the corners. In the last few months, as we've been dealing with the virus, I've had emails and phone calls and text messages from so many cities and so many countries, but people that I've known for 30 and 40 years. And as I talk to people, people are filled with anxiety, uncertainty, fear, and where do I turn? What do I believe? What is God doing? Has he forsaken us? As we look at Daniel, we will see that he had not been forsaking them, and he will not forsake us.
Okay.
As we're thinking about Daniel, it's important for us to remember that he was a young man, but a man called of God, who had accepted that call and was willing to follow him wherever he was sent. And at this time, he was taken as a prisoner to another land. As he went into that land, as we follow this up, and we'll do that next time, Daniel went before the king, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. Daniel was able to interpret that dream. We find that as we went through this, Daniel's response in this nation, before Nebuchadnezzar, he was raised more and more highly in leadership until he and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego became the leaders over the whole country under Nebuchadnezzar. As we think about this, and please think about it until next week, then we'll talk about the dreams, we'll talk about God's answering the dreams and how God was honored in their lives and in their message. And Daniel changed the values and the heart and the direction of a nation. And that's my concern as we approach this today. We're living in a troubled time when people are just going 40 directions. But those who have come to know the Lord, who believe in and trust him and who follow him, will be used of him, and God will change the hearts and lives of others through those who are believers, through you. You have the opportunity of bearing witness for Jesus Christ in the time and age in which we live. And so that's my prayer for you today. That's my request. Please consider the Lord's place in your heart and in your life. And is he able to use you? Not only in your heart and life, not only in your family, but in your community, your place of work, your place of worship. Wherever he calls and places us, are we available and usable?